Good morning, everybody. So excited to be here with you and presenting this workshop, or this webinar rather, on cultural intelligence and what this all means and why it's so important, and especially I think in our environment in South Africa. So to start off, as you're aware that at Enshrine there's this learning academy that Enshrine Placement provides, where free webinars and possibilities of growth are available. And I'm very proud to be part of this process, and very proud to be able to present this webinar on this platform. So the Enshrine Learning Academy is we're passionate about igniting growth through knowledge, insights and awareness, and that's where this cultural intelligence webinar is based on. So we are a collaboration of a few executive coaches, and we in turn deliver different webinars on a different months. And in August we'll have something exciting. We'll have a live engaging conversations around inclusivity. But next month, Usha is going to be presenting this workshop or this webinar on how to overcome your insecurities and chase your success your way. And it's also a reminder for all those participants on this webinar to complete your contribution compass profile through the Enshrine Placement platform, because it's really a valuable tool in understanding and creating greater awareness and insight about yourself. Okay, so about today's webinar, my name is Anne Barrett, and so the workshop or the webinar is on leading with cultural intelligence. We are recording this session as we are aware that a great number of people are not able to attend live. But for those on live, we really appreciate, and we're looking forward to interaction and engagement. We'll be doing some polls during the session, and please, the greater number of questions and comments, the greater I can contribute in this in the next hour or so. So this webinar is on leading with cultural intelligence, and I'll be sharing a 4-part model for becoming more adept at managing across cultures. But before we start, I'd like to get an idea of the type of audience I have, and I'll be publishing a poll. If you can fill that in, please. So understanding whether you're attending this webinar based, you wanting to understand for yourself more about cultural intelligence, or are you interested in cultural intelligence because you're an organization and you're leading teams, and you want to have a greater understanding of that? Because based on the result of the poll, I can see or give more examples based on the audience that I have. I see that there's a question asked. Yes, would you like to ask a question? It's a teacher Wanda. Can I please ask you to use the chat room, please? It's going to be easier for me to follow and be able to answer. So if you can go there, and then I'll go through the questions as I see them. Welcome to all the people on board. It's so nice. So most of the people here are learning. 70% of you present are here for personal, so it's for yourself. So I'll be directing and sharing more insights about creating awareness around cultural intelligence. So we've got like a 66-33% split, so 67 personal, and then the balance individual organization. Thank you. So the agenda for this webinar is, we're first going to look at what does it mean, cultural intelligence, and why do we need cultural intelligence. I'm aware that there's an echo. I'm going to try to let me know if this improves now, if the echo is less. I'll just be checking the chat. So agenda, so the first thing is understanding cultural intelligence. The second one is going through the model, the intelligence, the CQ drive, the CQ knowledge, CQ standing for cultural intelligence, and CQ strategy and CQ action, the 4 models. And then also, why is it important from a return on investment for a company, and developing, and how do we process and developing a cultural intelligent team? And the question is, will it be possible to share the slides after the workshop? And yes, we will do so. Thank you. So why is cultural intelligence so important? If we looking at South Africa, and I'm not sure where everybody is from, I have to take the assumption that most of the people, based on the database that we've sent the link to, is mostly African-based, so the Sub-Sahara specifically. So we know we've got many, many different cultures, many different religions. We've got a great variety in all possible ways. So in order to make decisions inclusive of everybody in the company, or you as a person, is understanding the cross-cultural and being able to adapt in your decision making to include all the other cultures. It definitely increases the job performance. It improves creativity and innovation, and I'll go through the reasons and how we can measure that. There's an increased profitability and cost savings, which is what the companies always look at. And obviously there's enriched situational awareness, which impacts all different environments in which we work. So I want you to expand your vision when we're talking about cultural diversity. I want you to think within the company, within your own family, within the company, within the community, within the country, and we include all stakeholders, the customers, the employees. So it's really looking at the broader picture. For example, working in Joburg would be very different to working in Cape Town. There's totally different cultural intelligence required. Well, the awareness of the difference in cultures. So when I talk about cultural intelligence, I talk about the capability to function effectively across national, ethnic, and organizational cultures. You'll know that an IT department will have a different cultural intelligence than somebody in operations or logistics, or somebody working in a rural environment versus an urban environment. So all these different cultures, we need to be creating awareness on how it's going to impact, so how it's impacting all the decision making and all the actions that we are taking. I see here there is, thank you, Michelle, for answering that question on the sound. So when we're looking at the 4 models, the first model is in CQ drive. So that's what we're starting off with, is we need to be motivated. So any steps that we're going to take, we need to be motivated in understanding cultural intelligence. We need to be keen and understand what is the need for me to understand cultural intelligence. There needs to be an inner motivation in understanding other cultures for the benefit of the greater team. The second model is the CQ knowledge. So it's understanding the different values and norms and awarenesses of everybody around me. So it's really understanding what the values are, what the different leadership styles. So it's really an awareness, self-awareness, and an other awareness. Then the third part of the model is the CQ strategy. And this is all about, okay, so based on my awareness, based on what we're wanting to achieve, what is it that I can do to create greater cultural intelligence for my part and for the rest of the organization. And lastly is looking at our behavior So behavior is what we can see and not see. It's verbal and not verbal. It's the language that we use. It's a variety of things. So it's really understanding that my behavior is influenced by my cultural experiences, but how adaptable am I to be able to work in a different cultural environment? So we're going to dive deeper now into the various models and explain for yourself, so that you have a greater understanding. I just want to get to a poll, another poll that I want to understand about the audience is cultural intelligence important in your organization? In South Africa, I think we're lucky to be to have this. We're talking about the rainbow nation, but it really is so. And each color of the rainbow represents a different cultural identity, and together, what is a rainbow? It's just light. So it's from that point that I'm talking about. And when you go through it, you'll see that when we're leading teams, or when we're leading, or we're in a relationship, understanding how we can impact the relationship and have a greater conversation with the other people around us is when we understand what that whole rainbow looks like. So the poll shows that that 87% of us consider that cultural intelligence is extremely important in our environment. So let's go deeper now into the first model. So looking at the drive. So understanding how can I adapt? What is my motivation for engaging with cultural dimension? So the reason, so create awareness as to what is the reason for you attending this webinar. What would you like to get out of it? What is your motivation to spending now an hour live in this environment? And you know, what is your motivation? What would you like to get out of it? Is it that you want to that you're motivated and you're curious about other cultures? Is it about challenging your own stereotypes, or checking how what your assumptions are around the certain cultures? Is it about knowing yourself better? So what is your inner drive to understand different cultures? So for me, my passion is about getting the best out of people. So cultural intelligence obviously goes with it. And because we, as human beings, we're made up of so many layers through our experiences, our personalities, our community that we live on, and the interactions that we have with the various cultures around us. So it's really understanding from a personal point of view what your reason is for understanding cultural intelligence and increasing your awareness around it, and also for the team around you. So that is the first model. So that's the start. If there's no motivation to understand and engage with other cultures, we might just as well not go further. So what we need to look at is, the first part is really being honest with ourselves and saying, to what degree have I got certain stereotypes in, certain groups of people that I assume they behave in a certain way. For example, in my case, am I aware of my privilege of a white person? The white privilege. It's a real thing, and with that comes your confidence level. Are you able to have conversations around this, or do you find it difficult to engage these type of conversations with people around you or with yourself? Do you believe that you're culturally unbiased? that you're aware of all the social justice or social justice issues, and are you aware of your own judgments around various cultures? And the best way to understand people, so in a working environment, it's quite easy because the values and the core values of the organization will support the multicultural environment. Where you really learn about other cultures is when you eat or when you socialize. So after work and you're having a drink, or you're meeting colleagues or suppliers or customers in a different culture, and you eat around them, because each culture will have different experiences. It's also looking at, what are the advantages of being, for me, a white female? What are the advantages? How does it support me in my future career that I understand other cultures? How asking questions around how does it feel to be a white male, or Black female, or Indian female? So it's really curiosity and understanding. By me being having a higher cultural intelligence, my relationship as a leader will definitely increase, and my influence will increase. And it's also there's a bigger purpose for it. So it's not cultural intelligence for the sake of cultural intelligence. It's cultural intelligence because we want to make the world a better place, where there's a greater understanding, where there's a greater interaction between all of us, and we commonly get to a bigger picture and a bigger impact in the world, because that's basically our human need, is really making that difference in the world. Before I go to the next one, I'd like to do another poll. And so I'm going to create, it's questions to get you to self-reflect a bit, and seeing that the majority of the people are here for personal reasons, I think this is a great opportunity. So reflect on your behavior in the last 6 months. Have you consciously changed your behavior in order to adapt to other cultures over the last 6 months? So it's really creating a conscious awareness of what behavior do I need to change in order to adapt to other cultures. So I've got a very cultural intelligent audience today. So 67% say often, and 30% say sometimes. So this is great. And I'll go through adaptability a little bit later. So the second part of the model is understanding cultural intelligence knowledge. So it's understanding the values, the norms, the leadership. What are other cultures like? So it's about, and that we learn through experience. So do we assess the limits of our knowledge? So do we presume that we know everything about the cultures? Are we asking a lot of questions around when we engaging with somebody who's culturally different? Are we asking really questions, and are we really listening to see that we are picking up something that we didn't know before? Do we understand the influence culture can have? So I recognize that cultures change over time and can vary from person to person, as does attachment to culture. So it's really having that understanding our own limitations. So it's continuously developing the capacity for assessing areas where there are gaps in my knowledge. So when I always get excited when I meet somebody that are from a different culture, different religion, and for me, it's so interesting for me to understand what drives this person. Why are they behaving in such a way? What's important to them? So that is the whole part about the cultural intelligence knowledge. So it's knowing what differences matter. So it's seeing the culture from your own perspective and how it's influencing, and also how it's influencing others. So it's understanding different languages. I speak 4 languages, unfortunately none of the African languages. So that is my next project, is to really understand that, and it's critical in our South African environment. So it's also looking at the basic cultural systems, whether it's rural or urban, organizational or personal. It's continuously understanding and questioning our perceptions of what we perceive knowing about cultures of others and of ourselves. The next model, so sorry, I would like to forgot about this part. So you've got to look at what we see and what we don't see. So what is like the iceberg. So the universal culture, we understand how Africa is different to Europe, is different to Asia. So for example, Africa overall culture is more about collective and communities, as opposed to Europe is more about individualist environment, and Asia is also very much based on communities. So you have all these different, and we'll go through that in a little bit more detail. So that is the universal culture one that we see on top. We can see the art, we can see how we eat. Different cultures have different foods, different monies, exchange, trade exchanges. But what we don't see and what drives our behavior are the cultural values and assumptions. So it's the unconscious, the taken for granted beliefs, perceptions and feelings. So this is really where the change happens, and when you're having an understanding in that, and that you only learn through experiences and through understanding. But from a leading point of view or in a relationship point of view, if you're not clear and get awareness of what is unconscious, that's where the downfall of a lot of relationships work in a cultural environment. And then at the end, the personal way, your own strengths and your own conditioning and your own belief system molded over the years by your own environment is is the last layer that we see. So there's many layers that we need to go through to be able to see everything of a person or a community. So I'm going to go and explain about the 10 different cultural dimensions, and I'll go through it reasonably quick, but it's for you to understand how many different layers we need to understand. So the first one is, I mentioned it a little bit, is individualism versus collectivism. So in an individualist environment, in a work environment, we're going to emphasize on individual goals and rights. But in a collective environment, we emphasize on group goals. That is the important part. It's all about making sure that the group is over and above the priority over the individual. I'm sorry, I seem to have a problem with my power. I'm just going to plug it in. I apologize for the 2 minutes. I don't know why my power cable is not plugged in. Oh no, this is not what it should be working on. Somebody took it out. Okay. So then if we're looking at the power distance, it's about, so if it's lower power distance, what we mean is emphasis on equality, shared decision making, as opposed to high power distance, the emphasis is on differences in status. So decisions are made by the superiors. Now, this is very important to understand because we're working in an environment where we believe that individuals, more and more organizations talk about taking initiatives, working in environments where you are have to take responsibility, and it doesn't matter at which level. So it's very important to understand what environment that you're working on. So in southern, if we look at sub-Sahara, we kind of in the middle between low power distance and high power distance. So in a low power distance environment, when you lead them, is you forego formalities. But in a high power distance individuals, then we need to follow the chain of command. So that would be, for example, in the Arab world. This is very, very important. Or in Latin America. These are the very important environments where we do this. The next one is uncertainty avoidance. So it's about, so certain environments emphasize on the flexibility and adaptability, and other environments prefer to have emphasis on planning and predictability. So here again, Sub-Sahara falls in the middle, but Nordic Europe is very low. They emphasize flexibility, but then Latin America and Latin Europe, they emphasize planning and predictability. So you can see that all these different environments create different challenges. The next one is cooperative versus competitive. This is an important one as well. So we could be in an environment where when we cooperative, we talk about collaboration, or it's a win-win situation or win-lose situation in a competitive environment. So you will have different goal setting and different times of teamwork in those different environments. So here, Sub-Sahara is falling on the cooperative. So we always talk about collaboration. We're talking about getting things done together. It's basing it on trust and care for the others, as opposed to the competitive environment is going to be the Anglo and Germanic Europe. So that environment is much more difficult to create a collaborative work environment. The next one is short-term versus long-term. We know this in Africa, we're talking about now. So it's a very short-term environment. So the culture is focusing on the now and not really focusing on the future. So there are 10 of them. The next one is direct versus indirect. So that's all about communication. It's about, do you say things straight out, or do you say things, in an indirect way? It's about, and I've got an example a little bit later where you're talking about, do you say to somebody, get the report done, or do you say to somebody, would it be possible to get the report done? So different cultures will require different ways of speaking to each other. And it's really understanding all of this. The next one is being versus doing. And that one, again, is the being is the emphasis on quality of life, as opposed to doing is the emphasis on being busy and meeting goals. In South Africa, in the sub-Saharan Africa, the focus is more on being. So as leaders, we need to create opportunities for personal growth. We need to affirm who the person is first and foremost, and we need to manage that relationship. And the Anglo-Germanic Europe, the emphasis is on being busy. So as a leader, we need to provide training and development. We need to affirm accomplishments. We need to manage that process. So it's very different. So being is about managing the relationship. Doing is about managing the process. So the next one is universalism versus particularism. So universalism is about the emphasis on the rules, standards, which is, again, the Anglo-Germanic Europe, as opposed to particularism, which is sub-Sahara, and where we're emphasizing on specific, unique standards. And we're talking again about relationship. And that's why I love Africa, is that relationships are so much more important than processes and systems. The one before the last one, neutral versus effective, It's about emphasizing non-emotional communication, which is a neutral, or effective, so where we being expressive communication. And again, Sub-Sahara falls in the expressive part, versus the Nordic and Germanic Europe is mostly about emphasis on non-emotional communications. So when you look at South Africa, we've got a total mixture of all these different cultures. The last one is monochronic and polychronic. So the monochronic is emphasis on a linear approach to time and work, and personal lives are kept separate. And then the polychronic one is the emphasis is on multitasking. So in South Africa, on Sub-Sahara Africa, we fall under the polychronic. So as leaders, we always need to find ways to be flexible on deadlines that are less important. We need to, as leaders, we need to communicate the relational impact if the deadline isn't met. And I'm sure you guys can recognize that. I'd like to do another poll now, just to create another awareness around cultural intelligence. And the question is, I have found that there are some things that are really which really matter to me that I will not compromise on. And that is also important to understand. So which ones will we compromise on, and which ones will we not compromise on? The previous question was around where we compromise. So we need to find that balance, because in that process, we could be losing each other, or ourselves rather. So it's about understanding which values will I not compromise on, and understanding which values will I compromise on. And it's very difficult in a different cultural dimension to be able to what degree do we adapt, and losing ourselves and our honesty and who we are as a person, as opposed to, finding that balance. So from the audience, 70% find that that there's something that which they will not compromise on, which is great, because it means that you understand where you need to be adaptive, but not losing yourself in that process. Thank you for sharing. So now we're coming to the third part of this model, is the strategy part. So now that I've created the awareness, now I can start planning and checking and going forward with what I know. I'm motivated. I know where my limitations are, and how do I go aboard getting awareness or strategy to increase my cultural intelligence. So you need to be very aware when you think from your gut. Your gut is based on your subconscious knowledge. So I invite you to go out and have conversations and interaction, preferably outside the working environment, because that's when the real person comes in and you're talking about things that you haven't shared before. And so you plan those ones in a working environment. As a team leader, you could create those occasions where, for example, you have like monthly, somebody brings typically a food that they would share with the family, and that the rest of the culture or the team wouldn't have had that experience before. So it's really planning cross-cultural interactions outside the work environment. It's about becoming more aware, going to parts of the town that you haven't been to, or shops that you would never go to, looking at art that you haven't seen before. So it's really consciously practicing different cultures, different environments, so that you're able to have different layers of understanding. And when you have conversations with people around you, then be very aware of what your assumptions were before you came in, and the outcome of it. So, and also if it's appropriate for the other person. So it's really going at a much greater awareness in interactions with other individuals. And also, the 5 why questions. Ask a question 5 times, why, to to the real core of what the message is. So understanding the why, the core of it only happens after you ask the question 5 times. Then you get to the core of what that interaction is about. What drives, why is this person doing that? And you keep on asking 5 times, and you'll get a totally different outlook on that person. We often see this, and when I see one of those cars, my immediate thought is, it's a rich guy, not a girl, a rich guy that doesn't care about the other people, and it's a person that just thinks about themselves. But the other view could be, well, this is a person, when they came, there were other cars parked differently. So each one of us will have a different story about this car and the way it's parked. Certain people might not notice that it's that it's using 2 bays. My immediate one is, it's a rich guy, probably white, and with very little care for other people. So that is my subconscious immediately coming up. But I don't know the whole story. So to what degree is my thinking influenced by my experiences? And so the first thing that comes up is my gut feeling, but that's not the truth. Maybe it is. I don't know. I can't make that assumption. Let's do another poll to create some awareness. In your environment, are you known to have friends from many different cultures? Are you one of those people that have got, various different religions, different ethnicity, different countries, different tribes, so all different, gender? Oh, wow, all of you are known to have friends from many different cultures. The other question that you can ask yourself is, did you make a new friend in the last 6 months from a totally different culture? And you could even go like beyond 700 kilometers from your house, and then you go 7,000 kilometers from your house to increase that environment, your cultural understanding of your community, and make it bigger and bigger. So this audience is very culturally intelligent and aware, because 80% of the people have friends from many different cultures. This is awesome. Thank you. So when we're looking at the last part of the model is when we're going into action. So what is my behavior looking like? So now I've got the strategy. I'm gonna meet different people in different cultures, and what is the action? How am I going to behave going forward? So the most important thing is be yourself. So that question earlier, where you compromising yourself or where you're adapting and when not to adapt. Always be confident and be sure of to stay yourself. You can adapt your communication. You can show empathy, and you can lead differently. But you always have to ensure that you are yourself. That's why with the motivation, when we started off the drive, the cultural intelligence drive, is you need to have the motivation, but also the self-confidence in understanding where you are in this process and what you can to adapt to and what not to adapt to. So this is really very critical. So for example, in communication, look at the different ways we can communicate. We can say, run the budget report. Or we can say, I want you to run the budget report. In a more collective environment where you want engagement and where the power, distance power is not big, then you can say, how about running the budget report? Or can you run the budget report? You get engagement. And wouldn't it help to have a budget report? So can you see all the different ways that we can say the same thing with the same outcome, but culturally aware of what is working for this environment? What would work with this person, with this team, or this company, but wouldn't work with a customer, for example. So every single word that you are using is based on your audience. So when you're leading yourself or others, you can do it differently. So understanding when you're negotiating a goal, is it about a contract? Then your communication is very different than if it is about a relationship. So remember, in sub-Saharan Africa, the environment that we are in, it's mostly based on relationship. So it's about a win-win, as opposed to a contract, which often lead, or the competitive environment, which is the win-lose. So in sub-Sahara, the focus is on relationship, on win-win, collaborative. In Europe, mostly it's competitive. It's based on contract and the completion of the contract and the timeline of the contract, and it's often a win-lose environment. Are we leading? Do we need to lead from an informal point of view or formally? Do we call each other sir or Mr., Mrs., or doctor, or can you go informal and just call your boss by the first name? So these are all different ways that we communicate, but we need to be conscious of that and what is right for this environment with this person compared to another environment and another person. Are we time sensitive? So in South Africa, Sub-Sahara, we're not really time sensitive. But in Europe, if you're not getting things done on time, it's got bigger impact and consequences than in Sub-Sahara. So you can see there's many ways of leading differently, and cultural intelligent leaders and individuals can adapt to each environment flexibly, understanding what is needed to engage in what and the outcome that we are looking for. Let me do another poll just to create an awareness again. So this one is about, I have courageous conversations with people from a different culture from me. So it's really like, so for me, it's understanding, for example, a person that's selling fruit on the street, I can spend like 2 hours with that person to really understand where they're coming from. What is the driver for them to be there? What is their background? How did they grow up? Or a woman that has been raped, or a man that has been raped, what is the environment that they grew up? What led to that possibility? Is really having those difficult conversations that we kind of avoid, and it's difficult for us to have difficult conversations, but that is a webinar on its own. So with me, it helps me when I'm reading biographies of other people that are able to express their experiences and give a hindsight as to what made them the person that they are today. And often it is about really opening up and really having the courage to understand that person and sharing that information with somebody. So 36% of you say often, 50% say sometimes, and never is 12. So I think that is correct. That is my perception of the environment, is that we're having conversations, but we're not delving in too deep. We're doing it a little bit on the surface. So yeah, that's my passion, is to be able to have greater, deeper conversations that are difficult. So going back to adapt or not adapt, I really want to stress is adapting is not compromising yourself in the environment that you're in. So it's adapting for a bigger purpose and not adapting for a bigger purpose. So it's consciously choosing what is right for me and the organization or the environment that I'm in. So how do we do this? The practices is we learn what practices and taboos are most important in the key areas of where you work. So we're looking for consistent feedback of what is right. Is my action right? Is the way that I'm communicating correct? Are you getting the correct feedback? Is this what you are wanting to hear? It's about having zero tolerance for yourself and the organizations for inappropriate jokes. And I find that very difficult. I get them a lot. And I have to have the courage to say I'm not interested in those jokes. They're not, for me, appropriate. And it is stereotyping a specific cultural group. So it again, it takes courage to be able to say, no, I'm not interested in that. So in an organization, having the zero tolerance is a number one criteria to be able to deliver on cultural intelligence. So the predictors of cultural intelligence, personality traits are very big. So if you're a person that's curious, you're open, you are conscientious, you know about social injustices, and you know that's part of your life. You've got extraversion, so it means that action happens with others. So it's not being an extrovert, but it's about the way that you get things done is through conversations with other people. And then it's also about your experiences in your formal education. It's about intercultural experiences. It's working with multicultural teams. And I think with nowadays, with so many environments where we're working with remote teams or part-time teams or part-time contractors, you know, all these, we're just going into a greater and greater intercultural organizations. So, you know, being curious and open and, you know, being confident in yourself that you know, you are who you are, and that's okay, and so is everybody else around you. So is being emotionally stable is also a big important one. And then the results of cultural intelligence is all about what are the results when we're creating teams or when we are more culturally intelligent, is that we make better judgment and decision making, we understand the consequences, we able to create trust with the people that we're communicating with, whether it's our customers, our stakeholders, our personal relationship. It's any basis of any relationship is trust. Also by leveraging cultural intelligence, you're able to be more creative and innovation and working with others based on their cultural differences and really embracing that. I've got another poll for you. We're close to the final post. Thank you for keeping the polls going. So this one is about, have you discovered a bias in the last 6 months that you didn't know about? So I realized, I'll say this again, is the white privilege. I thought, I had to struggle with it, but I came out with my problems that I come up with, or what I perceive as a problem. I'm definitely wasn't aware of the privilege I have to be a white female. So and it was a specific environment that I was in. I was in Delft, and there had been a murder, and the people I was talking to, they had seen the murder, but they had also seen the car that from which the person was shot from. And it was like, oh, but this is great. We have the number plate of the shooter. And then the people just looked at me and they said, but we know exactly who the gang members are. We know exactly where they live. We know exactly who did this. It's just, nothing is happening about it. And in my white privilege is, oh, now we have, we know how to sort this problem out. So that was a big one for me that I had to experience. So 63% of you say that you've discovered the bias, and 37 of you know, so 2/3 of you. So the return on, for why would companies focus on in cultural intelligence? So we know they always look at the bottom line. So it's productivity, it's savings, it's about innovation, it's about speed and efficiency, it's being able to collaborate and leverage on each other's strengths and culturally diversity. We know these things. We know that it makes impact on the bottom line. We're just not able to do it fast enough in organizations and take it to the next level. How do we develop this in teams? Is we do this through leadership development. So it's really about creating and having the question on which part of the businesses is being hindered by a lack of cultural intelligence. So it could be that the teams are not set up correctly, that we not understand culturally the diverse markets. Marketing teams are, it's quite an experience for me to understand that marketing teams, when they're so focused on markets, they're focusing specifically on color and age, but there's so many more different cultural diversities that could be understood better for different marketing messages. And then also is understanding teams is how do you help your team to have a greater cultural intelligence. So understanding these will result in greater employee engagement, greater innovation, and flexibility in achieving what you're wanting to achieve. But again, it's a strategy and it needs to be actioned. And as long as it's not part of your key performance indicators, very likely that it's not going to happen. So how you're developing the teams is you have a development plan for all your employees, and you do this together as a team. You screen candidates for cultural intelligence, and you can send me an email and I'll give you those questions. There's assessments on cultural intelligence, and if you want that behavior to be great, make it sure that there's a reward for that kind of performance, or make it part of your core values. That is one way of doing it. So to complete this, you can see that you need to scan so much more than what we're currently scanning. We've got to go through the iceberg and look at all the different layers that are making up individuals and making up teams, and our own biases within that as well, as leader or as an individual. And that's what we do at Team Dynamics. We're looking and delving into the whole person, into the whole team, into the whole organization, into the whole community, and create this cultural intelligence and create higher engagement and team dynamics. So one of the tools that we use is Contribution Compass, because that's where we're looking at where the strengths are. That is one of the layers, that is the personal part, the most deepest part that we're not clear on. That needs to be seen first before we can build on all the rest of the iceberg. And yeah, I've come to the end of the presentation, and I'd love to hear, to have your questions so I can answer them. I've got one last poll, so you can think of your question. But this poll is also creating awareness. I avoid situations when I find myself in a minority. So when are you avoiding them? Or are you quite comfortable to being in the situation where you find yourself in a minority? And while you're doing the poll, also if you can think of your questions that you would like to answer, you're very welcome to contact me later as well, via email or via phone, if you're wanting support or information, or if something was not clear and you'd like to get more details around that. My website is teamdynamics.co.za. I'm on a platform called A Better Africa. So my website is a bit different. It's not just Team Dynamics. I'm part of a bigger picture. My purpose is to change and make Africa a better place. And you can become, so on my website is you can become a member, and then as about being part of a member, we can start creating discussion groups and sharing information based on that. So I will be sending a link to that website and invite you to become a member of my platform. So the result of the poll is that 65% of you avoid situations where you find yourself in a minority, and that may be the first action you can take or plan strategy is creating moments where you're able to create that and consciously choose to do that and see what comes out and how it changes you as a person and as a way to lead. Let me go to the questions, see if there are any questions. I'm not seeing. I've got a question here. How many people connected are in HR environment? Maybe we could have a group chat wherein we connect and support each other. Beautiful. I can definitely set that up. Thank you, Levi. I'm just checking to see if there are other questions. The info will be available afterwards. Yes, we're going to be, so the recording has happened, and we will be uploading it to YouTube and ensuring placements through Karen or Michelle. Will be sending you the link. And like I said, if you want more information about specific things, then or items that I didn't have the chance to go into more detail, you're very welcome to contact me. And thank you for the feedback on the webinar. Sorry, I got a bit stressed out there when I lost power, and I had to find a different power plug to carry on. So I apologize for that not so focused time for a couple of minutes. And yes, I don't see any other questions. And I really thank you for the time you spent with me. I really appreciate your time and your engagement with the polls, and for me the opportunity to engage a little bit with each one of you in a different way, and hope to see you sometime in the future or meet you at the next webinar that Usha is going to do, and then in August we're going to have a different kind of webinar which we're all excited. Belinda and Usha and I will be sharing that platform, and we're going to do something different where we're hoping to see you on that platform. Levi asks, do you do awareness workshops for companies regarding team dynamics? Oh, yes, that's what we love doing. Absolutely. So you can reach out if we can support you. Thank you, guys. Have an awesome day, and see you again next month or the month after. Take care of yourselves and enjoy those moments when you are with culturally different people. Thank you.